Welcome to our home. I love that these services have allowed us to express worship and teaching in different ways and in different places. And I hope you see the opportunity that just like we can worship God and learn about Him in our house, you can in yours as well. Families can be dedicated in their homes, and you can dedicate yours to God in your home too. In a year where everything feels different, Mother's Day is no exception. I know what Mother's Day has looked like for me, and maybe you do for you in years past, or maybe for you it's looked like there's been women in your life that you've said, I'm gonna honor them today. But right now in this unique moment, I think there's a chance for us on days like today to remind the women in our lives of how important they are to us. Whether it is your mom or the mother of your children or a significant woman of influence in your life, it is beyond a doubt that there is someone you should be thinking about sending a text message to and honoring right now. A few years ago, there was a study to identify the salary mothers deserved. The list of their roles, whether they work outside the home or not, are incredible. Academic advisor, accountant, art director, bookkeeper, buyer, coach, dietitian, event planner, interior designer. The list just keeps going. And the annual salary? $168,000. Well, those studies can't possibly show us the value of the women in our lives. They do highlight a few of the things we're probably learning even more firsthand right now. My wife, Alyssa, is a stay-at-home mom, and she's had a bunch of things that she does in addition to that. But one of the things that's been happening right now, being at home, is I've seen all the ways that in a typical day, she has to step into, step around, and step beyond obstacles and challenges as opportunities. At Virtual School and the partnership that we've tried to have together with teachers and local school leaders, it has been a lot. I know you understand. For moms, there's something so unique and special about the way that they care for their kids, from the way that they care for their families. Whether you're a stay-at-home mom or you're a working mom, there is more weight on you in this season than maybe you've ever felt before. I want to focus on a unique attribute of moms this year, though, that moms move mountains one nudge at a time. Their investment is consistent and patient in the lives of everyone they influence. This year, we want to spend a few minutes talking about the value that moms have, not just right now, but all the time in our lives and the lives of those they get a chance to influence. The up-close experience that I've had over the last few weeks at home has been incredible. It's shown me the way that Alyssa has cared for our kids and for our family. I'm guessing if you've been able to be up close to a mom in your life, well, there are times of frustration and exhaustion. There are times of deep appreciation that you have and can experience for the mother in your life in a way that is totally unique and fresh. One of the things that I've watched over the course of the last few weeks is the incredible value that I watch Alyssa place on our kids' future. I think it's easy to consider whether or not they've accomplished what they need to for the morning or for the day, but being able to look at how they are doing today and how that lines up with who they're growing into has been really amazing. Today, we get a chance to be able to step back and ask ourselves a really important question. I actually want you to answer this question on the social media feeds or wherever you're watching this right now. What has your mom or the moms in your life shown you about instilling value in the next generation? This question is really important because I think when we realize in our own lives the way that people saw beyond the immediate for us, or the way that someone cared beyond what was convenient in the moment, it can remind us of the value in that happening today, both to us and through us for the people around us. There are plenty of examples of women who have incredible influence throughout the scriptures. And while I could go to a bunch of different places, today I want to spend a few minutes talking about Timothy. If you've been in church for a while or studied your own Bible at all, there's a chance you've stumbled across two letters in the New Testament, 1st and 2nd Timothy. These are two letters written by a first century leader, the Apostle Paul, a sent one of Jesus who wrote to a young pastor that he mentored named Timothy. Timothy became the pastor at the church in Ephesus, a major city, making a huge difference that we actually just read about for a few weeks as a church. Paul was writing to Timothy in both of these letters with different intentions. In the first letter, he was talking to Timothy about what it meant to lead a church and the requirements of maintaining unity within that. And the second letter is really about his personal interest in Timothy, his care for Timothy, about what it meant for him to stay connected and passionately following Jesus. But before Paul begins in the letter, he shows a really important reason that he can be even having this conversation with Timothy in the first place. Paul recognized that there was something so important that had taken place long before they had ever met. Just a few verses into the first chapter of 2 Timothy, Paul begins verse 3 by saying this: "I thank God whom I serve, as did my ancestors, with a clear conscience, as I remember you constantly in my prayers night and day. As I remember your tears, I long to see you, that I may be filled with joy. I'm reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now, I am sure, dwells in you as well. For this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." Paul spends time talking to Timothy not only about what it was going to take, what he needed to do to move forward, but also about why he knew what this was as a shared desire for both of them. Paul talks to Timothy about what it was that he knew deep in his heart was true of Timothy. The reason that he could look at this and feel so confident was that it was actually a generational faith for Timothy. It wasn't just that obvious because, plenty of us have people in our lives who have great parents but ended up walking away from the path that God had for their life, or making decisions that they spent time, maybe even years, cleaning up. But for Timothy, it's obvious that this connection to his grandmother and to his mom were really what pushed him towards this closer faith in God. To us, those phrases may sound a little different than the way we would describe something today, but at least we have an idea of what this feels like. The thing that was so unique for Timothy is that while the faith originated within the faith of Judaism, Paul is really pointing to the early faith in Jesus that had already rippled through the generations before Timothy. Timothy was the recipient of generational faithfulness, and I wonder how long it took him to experience it. It's interesting to watch Alyssa with our kids because they're all at different ages, and so what they're able to experience and process is very different. As we spend time reading with them in the evening or asking them spiritual questions, it's far easier for the older kids to be able to answer questions and for us to be able to tell the difference between giving the I gave you the answer you wanted to hear versus what's actually true in their life. I know that it's difficult to be patient, but what Paul shows us is that the patience that Timothy's mother and grandmother showed in his life was worth the investment. Moms are so often the ones that show us the value of being patient and waiting on the generational investment of their faithfulness. So, as we spend a few minutes together, continuing to sing and continuing to remember, I want to leave you with a really important question to answer in the comments as we go back to some music. And I'll come back in just a few minutes to finish our conversation. What are the words of life that God has said about you, and maybe your mom has said to you, that you need to start believing?
I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up. Am I more than just the sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. You say I am loved when I can't feel a thing, and you say I am strong matters now is everything you think of me. In you I find my worth, in you I find my identity. Oh, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I am falling short, and when I don't belong. Oh, you say I am yours, and I believe. Oh, I believe what you say of me, and I believe. Taking all I have, and now I'm laying at your feet. You'll have every failure, God. You'll have every victory. Oh, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I am falling short, and when I don't belong. Oh, you say I am yours, and I believe. Oh, I believe what you say of me. I believe. Oh, I believe. Yes, I believe what you say of me. Oh, I believe.
This year is another chance for our family and for our home to celebrate and remember how important Alyssa is, and for you, the moms in your lives are. Something that's interesting for me to think about on Mother's Day throughout the years is the fact that I probably wouldn't be here without my mom. I mean, I definitely wouldn't be here because I wouldn't be alive, but while I would still be alive and I'd probably have a job, I'm not sure about being a pastor, and I'm not sure if I'd have the family that I have today. In my life growing up, it was not an assumed reality that you went to church. As a matter of fact, my dad growing up never went to church, and that was a pretty easy excuse for all of us to be able to choose to not go ourselves. It was easy when you're growing up for my siblings to just say they weren't going because of my dad. You see, it wasn't just the fact that my dad didn't go to church. That was part of it, but there was this contrast between the way that we had to present ourselves in public and what was happening in private. My growing up years were pretty difficult with my dad and the pressure to pretend things were better than they really were, and that pressure could easily show up in church settings. But from the earliest years, my mom and I connected over something. We connected over faith. So I have vivid memories of going to church with my mom as a little boy, just her and I. Sometimes we would stop at McDonald's on the way and grab breakfast. Other times we would just head right there. I would sit next to my mom and I would watch the way that she studied and watch the way that she was committed to continuing to learn and grow in God. And that showed me that even in the midst of all the challenges we found ourselves in, there was still something bigger that I could depend on. I still connect with the words that Paul issues to Timothy here, because the flame of this gift that God had given to Timothy and revealed through his grandmother is what I felt from my mom as a little boy. It was so important as a child to be able to figure out what it was that I needed to do with all of this. And so from a really young age, I couldn't have told you what it all meant, but I knew that if the standard of connecting with God was holiness, perfection, there was no way I was going to be able to do that on my own. So as a little boy, in part because of the faith of my mom, I made a choice to have my own faith. And I'm guessing that if you're a follower of Jesus, somewhere along the way, somebody in your life had the same kind of impact on you. And I'm guessing that for some of you, your mom had a really big impact on you in that way. Maybe for you, it took years for you to be able to see and understand the impact and the influence that she patiently made on you as she moved mountains one nudge at a time in your life. My mom's passion for understanding God actually started in her lineage as well. My mom was born and raised as a Jewish woman and grew to understand and experience God through the lens of the Hebrew Scriptures before she came to know Jesus as the Messiah as an adult. Her passion to grow, learn, and study is what gave me the passion that I have for the same things. She stood on the shoulders of those who would come before her, the people who were willing to move mountains one nudge at a time in her life. And now I stand on the shoulders that she gave me. My mom is not a very tall person in physical stature, but her spiritual influence in my life continues even today. You see, moms are so good at finding the ways in the areas in our lives that we are willing and ready to listen. But the problem for most of us is not that our moms are not investing us. The problem is that we are not listening. I want to ask you another question for you to be able to answer in the chat right now. What is something that your mom has been trying to invest in you that you've been resisting? Maybe it's something that you know better than, or you just don't want to do the work that's required to make the changes in your life based on her feedback. You know that the seeds she's been planting in your life about a way of life or about a way of thinking or something you've been making a decision around are right. See, in my experience, the moms in our life are often right, but we've decided we actually want to be right more, even beyond finding the right answer or making the right decision. Maybe that's just me. Moms are so patient with us because they understand that, and they don't risk the relationship to be right and have their way. They just patiently wait and watch. Paul gives us this really beautiful picture, even as we consider the ways we know there are things we still need to grow in. He connects the dots for what Timothy needed to grow in from this incredible power that he had received through this generational faith of his grandmother and mother. In verse 7, Paul says God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. I can't think of a message that our moms probably want us to hear more right now than this message right here. It is so easy in the midst of everything we're facing and the uncertainty of the challenges each and every day to let fear control us. Paul tells us that the thing God gave us, and this thing that for Timothy was revealed and given to him through his grandmother and mother, was not that he would be controlled by a spirit of fear, but that he would recognize the power of the love and the self-control that God had given him by this new and better Spirit of God living inside of him. It doesn't mean that we're not scared, and it doesn't mean that we don't feel all of it. That just wouldn't be honest. What Paul is talking about is what we allow ourselves to be controlled by. What Paul is talking about is the investment that people have made in our lives, especially the mothers in our lives, to be able to see something beyond the immediate. And so this Mother's Day, what does it look like for you to demonstrate the power that God has handed to you, oftentimes through the mothers in our lives who have showed care and love to us? What does it look like for you to step into and work to help with problems in your neighborhood, with your coworkers, or in your community? It would be so easy to simply continue to keep yourself isolated, and maybe you have a really good reason to do that. But even if you have to stay home right now, how can you, from your home, encourage others or be able to support others? Not only that, Paul gives us a picture that love is at the core of this as well. Not just giving and loving the people that like us, but loving everyone. How is it in this season that you have loved everyone? How have you loved even the people that disagree with you, even the people that are on the other end of the political spectrum? We are actually called to love other people as God has loved us. Is that the way you've been loving people? Or are you loving people based on convenience and comfort? And the last thing that Paul talks about here is self-control. He talks about the need for each and every one of us to be able to be controlled from our inner self by the power of God. So much of our culture today is built around a victim mentality. It is awful and tragic for the number of people that have experienced a big T trauma and the pain that goes with that. But there is something so important when you watch someone that has experienced big trauma in their life. They realized very quickly that they can't control some of these outside things when they're not in control. The people that come out on the other side of experiencing that trauma, they have something in common. Oftentimes, those people have realized that they can only control themselves. Paul's not just talking here about this kind of humanistic idea of control. He's talking about a supernatural power to be able to not be a victim of your circumstances, but to seek to redeem your circumstances by the way you think, by the way you love, and by the way you live. So this Mother's Day, will you let the circumstances around you control you? Or will you let God's work and the control that God wants to happen in you be good, not just for your life, but for the lives of those around you? It's true that there are so many challenges we face today. And one of the things I think that's so interesting is we often want to control our outside circumstances, but not our internal perspective. In the midst of fear, if you want to not be controlled by fear, but guided by faith, it really moves from, are you trying to control what's on the outside of you, which is impossible, or are you trying to control what's on the inside of you? This Mother's Day, whether it's the mothers that we still have in our life or maybe a generation ago that you no longer have around, what would you like? What is it that they would want for you to honor them by fanning into flame this generational faith that God has given to you through them? Today will require more work from you to be able to set aside time, to be able to show appreciation, but start with a text message to the mom in your life right now. Send them a text message and wish them a happy Mother's Day and tell them a way that God has used them in your life. There are women in your life who have been trying to move mountains one nudge at a time. And let this reminder from Paul to Timothy be a reminder for you that it's not too late. Not too late to move from where you are closer to the heart of God. And not too late for you and His love to experience this new and better relationship that's demonstrated through you on this Mother's Day and beyond. Let me pray for you. God, I pray for every person who is checking this out right now, that you would remind each and every one of us of the generations that have gone before us. For some of us, God, there are pretty difficult experiences in our family, and this is a hard day. And so, God, I pray that you would pour a reminder of your grace and compassion in them today. For others, God, it's a mixed bag for many of us, and it's about choosing the perspective that will allow us to honor the people in our life well. And for others, God, there are people that we want to honor that are no longer here. And so, God, I pray that we would be able to connect with you out of a deep sense of appreciation. And that the women in our life who have made such an incredible difference by moving the mountains of our perspective and our concerns and our priorities one nudge at a time over years would sense how appreciative we are of that. God, remind us that the love we experience from so many incredible mothers in our life is a reflection of the love you have for us. As we sing about that right now, God, help us take that into the week. Help us take that into Zoom calls and FaceTimes and all the things in the coming days that we're going to do to show appreciation to the mothers in our life.